If I may, to that question, does that mean that one should not engage in what we could call useless speech, like talking about the weather and that kind of thing? I mean, yeah.
Well, I think during our last session there was something about useful activities or something that I answered. There's something about painting or cooking or something. I said that if it's useful, yes, if it's beneficial, then we could. If it's not beneficial, then somehow it's better to leave it. Similar, I think, in the context of the speech. Not to say that it's because it's useless that in a certain context it's useless, that therefore we have to leave it. I think it really depends on different contexts and how much of a control we have, also composure we have as an individual, as a person. If you feel like we are if you know that we are in control, well, meaning control in terms of having control over my speech, thought and action, then yes, I think there are times where one can engage into various speech, engage in various topics. One can talk about weather, one can talk about a lot of things, painting, cooking, baking, all of that, sports even. As long as it's beneficial, yes.
The next question is, what is the difference between trust and devotion, and how do we apply them in our meditation?
Devotion and trust. I suppose in English it might have a little difference of in terms of definition, but I think both of them are able to describe a little bit about what devotion or trust means, either in Sanskrit or either in Pali or in Tibet. So that's why I think sometimes we use the word trust, sometimes devotion. I sometimes use the word like confidence. So accordingly, I think on what topic we are talking about, accordingly we use those different English terms to describe the devotion. In short, I think what is devotion is basically the inspiration that you get when you see the quality of something or someone. Yeah, I think that's it basically. Yeah, that you feel inspired, you feel encouraged to somehow follow in the same footsteps or path, and you want to make it your own. I think somehow that's what it means. Yeah. So now the question was trust and devotion in the context of
how we can apply them in our meditation.
In our meditation, yes. So now I think if particularly, I think when we say meditation, if it's now involving a spiritual meditation, then yes, it plays a huge role. And within the meditation, then we really it begins with devotion, and it ends with devotion, basically. Yeah, because from the very first moment of meditation, and the attitude is that we see the benefit or at least even if you don't see the benefit, somehow we have an idea, we have hope that there is benefit. Initially it could be because of one's own one's expectations in terms of it'll calm me down, or it'll give me some peace, it'll give me some give me some sort of relief in terms of stress and so on. Okay, to begin with, one can begin like that. But the overall the point is that somehow it begins with devotion, meaning seeing that there is a benefit, and then of course without breakage of that inspiration or devotion, it continues all the way, and even when we conclude or rise from meditation, we also rise with devotion also. That's why then we are able to aspire at the end. That's why we at the end we also make dedications as well, because we see the benefit. So it's naturally there.
The last question is, can you please explain how best the true Buddhist can lead a normal, non-monastic life?
Probably, I think, following, in terms of a guidebook, the letter to a friend by Nagarjuna is almost like the basic guidelines that a non-monastic or non-ordained person would have to live, let's say. Yeah. So it's basically there. But either way, there are equal challenges. Yeah, that's the thing. I guess it really is an individual thing. And also, according to one's own karma, it's also different too. Some may have the motivation, but maybe lack the circumstances. Some may have the circumstances, but maybe lack the motivation in terms of entering an ordained life, of course. But sometimes, again, due to circumstances, probably the other way around might be even more beneficial, you know. So it's a really hard thing to say. But nevertheless, in order to ensure Buddha Dharma, for the benefit of sentient beings, of course, the monastic sangha is crucial. Yeah. Without it, I would say that it's very. It will be very, very difficult for Buddha Dharma to flourish. Yeah. That was one of the very first reasons why I think our historical Buddhist Mani established that Sangha. Yeah. And of course, I think he didn't intend to somehow develop that system, monastic system, so that he could convert all, you know. But somehow, according to their wish, according to one's own aspiration, and then to have that access, I think. So yes.
Those were the questions from Facebook for this week. So.
Yes. Hello.
Could you just say a few words about what you mean by beneficial?
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah, beneficial. Like that time, I think I've used it a few times during the topic of the question of speech. Yes, yeah, beneficial in terms of. From a Buddhist point of view, when we use the term beneficial, it often refers to two things, I think, or maybe one thing. Beneficial in this life and the next. That's one way of putting it. And the other is that beneficial in terms of it will help us reach liberation and then gain Samyak Sambuddha. So, beneficial in terms of, in that way, yes. So, if it helps, if by having, what was it? We can engage in pointless speech. We can whistle, hum. Yes, countless. Too many that I cannot, doesn't come in my mind. So basically we can do all of that if it's beneficial in this case. Maybe for some, they like to hum. Maybe humming is their hobby. Maybe it's their passion. Maybe it's the thing that really sort of makes their day. If they are not able to hum that day, it's a bad day. And cannot sleep, have nightmares in your dreams too, So for someone like that, probably to encourage them to reach liberation and enlightenment, let's say. Maybe you hum with them, Accordingly, yes. You hum a little and and you get closer, You hum twice, even closer. You hum a little more, to a point where then one can have maybe conversation and so on. So if you're in that kind of context, yes, I think it's beneficial to hum, to engage in, what's the right word? Non-beneficial speech? No.
Because useless.
Useless, yes. Useless speech. Yes. Useless speech. So similarly, whether it's speech or actions or thoughts, I don't know, I don't think so. Yes. Yes.
It's a question about reincarnation. I brought it yesterday in the class, and like most here, I'm from the West.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see in the teaching that it's very important that we don't pursue the Dharma only for this life, but it's really for many lives.
Oh, yes.
But I still, after many years, am not convinced about incarnation.
So what does it matter?
Maybe not. But I was thinking maybe you have some. I've seen films, I've read this and that, and I've taught and I don't know. somehow
Okay.
it would be really nice to get this conviction, this trust.
Yes. You lost me there when you said you've seen films, you know.
Well, documentary about
That's better,
more documentaries. Yes.
of course. No, I really understand your point. Yes, it's true. It's one thing that I think it's not just yourself. I think most of us have that difficulty actually to really able to believe it or accept it from the depth of your heart that there is a rebirth or reincarnation. But like I said, the point here is, I think, if we understand that, will it help us to be, or to become, or to continue being a decent human being or person? I think probably again, that's last time I used the term borderline. Yeah.
I think in my own case it will sort of help me to really diminish the importance of this life.
Okay.
And therefore expand my, Dharma activity.
Okay. And that's also possible. Well, once you have that kind of enthusiasm, normally I think probably you have a higher chance of actually experiencing what you seek, let's say, because of that drive, because of that enthusiasm that you want to see it for yourself. But at the same time, must make sure that this sort of expedition, let's say, doesn't start with high expectation, I think. With a goal, basically, what I'm trying to say. With a goal or aim, or to reach a finishing line, and so on. If you do that, then more and more disappointments will rise on the way, or at the starting point, and there's also a high risk that we might even be discouraged in this pursuit of finding what we're looking for. So in the meantime, the best thing that all of us can do is actually follow probably simple logics, the logics that are given, particularly to focus on causality, rather than reincarnation. Probably it's better to focus on causality. That's why I think although Buddhism's reincarnation is a very important part of Buddhism, nevertheless, that it isn't like the most obvious, let's say, topic, obvious subject. Instead, is causality actually, and I think there's a reason. I think because causality is easier to engage, it's easier to experience, and because it's very simple, quite simple actually. Whereas rebirth is quite a mysterious thing, Yes, there is that charm because it's an unknown thing, but nevertheless, it's because it lacks simplicity. It takes a long time. So instead, focusing on causality, and focusing on the various different types of causes, various different types of conditions, and the various different types of results. Particularly in the Abhidhamma Kosha, or in general in Abhidhamma, it describes very well about the different types of causes, conditions, and results. And of the very different mental events and the different types of positive, negative, in between, neutral mental events. So if we have that, first of all, memorized, and then if we meditate, let's say, if we meditate on the impermanence of speech, let's say, then I think we're able to pinpoint better, and then we're able to somehow relate that to rebirth and reincarnation better. Otherwise, it'll be just basically trying to pursue or go after something that is quite, not to say impossible, but really, really far to reach. Yes.
I have a question about merit. Actually, two questions.
Mm-hmm.
One is if increase of merit helps us to increase also devotion.
Yes.
Understand teachings of Guru better, or increase the confidence, so to say, in our life.
Yes.
And second question about merit is, can we believe that merit is also protecting us from expression of negative karma from previous lives? I ask this question because I see lots of very accomplished lamas with, I imagine, huge amount of accumulations, and they still go through very difficult situations of sickness of close ones or things like that. So I wonder if this is a kind of shield that can protect us from purifications, or it doesn't work like that, it's not interconnected like that.
So first thing is about how to develop.
If accumulation of positive deeds help us increase the devotion towards Allah.
It definitely does. We're supposed to be in the stage or phase of path of accumulation, So right now, almost every aspect of activities or dharmic activity, let's say, is all mostly about accumulation. Yes. So as we increase in that, as we persist and continue in that, then yes, we will develop more and more, basically stronger connection. Yeah. Yes. And secondly, then you said that
can we hope that
merit
accumulation will help us not to experience too much?
It will help to decrease. Yes. Decrease. What is it? And subdue past karmas. Yeah. Like, for example, when Ajatasashastra, I forget the name completely. Sorry? Yes, Ajatasashastra. So when he had started to realize what he had done in terms of having murdered his parents and done other many heavy, let's say, negative karmas. When he once again, of course, then tried to purify them, of course, wholeheartedly, of course, out of fear, but nevertheless, diligently when he did, he was able to really reduce, yes, due to his accumulation, he was able to reduce the very karma that he would actually face in his own life. in terms of experiencing what is said in the sutras is the experience of the hell realm. Yeah. So instead of actually, instead of having to be born in that realm, within dream, he was able to somehow experience the whole experience, and then overcome it, or basically overcome that particular debt, pay off that debt of karma. Yeah, there are many, I think, occasions like that.